welcome everyone. On behalf of the congregation of Oakridge Presbyterian Church, hearty welcome to all of you. I'm Reverend Ed Hoekstra. I'm the lead minister here at Oakridge, and we are thrilled that we can hold this event. We want people to make a good, informed decision, as voting day is coming next month, and we are honored to be part of this process. I just want to let you know that actually I don't live in this riding. I'm going to be putting the yellow and the red card up, so I don't have any favorites that I vote for, so no worries there. And Jane Swadridge as well, the other organizer, she doesn't live in this riding either. So we're just, again, I just want to say welcome to all of you. We trust that this will be just a wonderful night where we learn more informed, as we are told to be responsible citizens. And at this time, I'd like to call forward Paul Hubert, who is our moderator, and he is actually the councillor of Ward 8, which is the area we're in here in West London.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Well, that's a little loud, but clear. October 19th will be a historic day in Canada. General elections are always historic in a vibrant democracy, as they galvanize the nation's focus on the future. They are the culmination of a national dialogue that takes places at doors, in neighborhoods, coffee shops in communities, lunch tables in workplaces, and forums just like this tonight. Tonight we hope that you leave better informed, more aware, and truly incited to action on behalf of both your community and your country. We look forward this evening to a respectful conversation that honors and elevates the discussion. I'll just leave it at that. So tonight, and please hold your applause, I know some of you have some favorites in this crowd. I'd like you to welcome Dimitri Lascaris from the Green Party. Paul Hubert from the Conservative Party, Kate Young from the Liberal Party, and Matthew Rowlinson from the New Democratic Party. I told you you had some favorites in the crowd tonight. Let me explain how we're going to work tonight. There's really 3 segments to our evening this evening. The candidates are each going to start out with a 3-minute introduction, opening statement. We have drawn this by a very sophisticated drawing the number from the basket in the pastor's office. So it is legal and integrity and all that stuff's happening there. And so they will have 3 minutes each. Then there's the round of 5, which are on 5 different themes. If you don't like the questions, you can blame me, I wrote them. And you'll have 2 minutes each on each of those questions. And then there'll be the floor round. Now, we're not taking questions from the floor. You put questions in the box at the back, and we'll be randomly selecting them. They'll have 1 minute on each of those. So those are our 3 segments tonight. And then finally, they'll have 2-minute closing statements. And we have to be done just shortly after 9, very close to 9, because some of the candidates have another commitment yet this evening. There's no rest for the weary in an election campaign. Okay, so that's our format for this evening, and I think we'll have an outstanding evening. And by the draw, Mr. Holder will start, followed by Ms. Young, followed by Mr. Lascaris, and followed by Mr. Matthew Rowlinson. Okay, so Mr. Holder.
Well, by the look of that applause statement, I think there are probably 10 people in the place that haven't yet made a decision. So it should be a lot of fun tonight. Firstly, to Reverend Ed Hoekstra and to Paul Hubert, thank you for hosting us tonight and for allowing us to use Oakridge Presbyterian Church for your first all-candidates meeting ever, for hosting us all here tonight. But I'd also like to thank the citizens of London West. You know, I've had the privilege of serving as your Member of Parliament for these last 7 years. And I think that every day my team and I work to earn the right to provide that support for constituents in London West, as we all work, all of us, regardless of party, for a prosperous Canada and for families to do well here in our city. So I would say, look at what we've all achieved together if we just reflect back over the last several years. In fact, more Londoners are working. There are 10,000 more people with new jobs here in London than there have been in the last 12 months. That's 90% of the full-time and well-paying jobs. More London businesses and manufacturers are growing. In fact, you might be interested in knowing that manufacturing sales are up 20% across the province. We've lowered taxes on businesses and manufacturers. I call those the job creators. And that's intended to help protect the 30,000 Londoners who work in manufacturing and provide for their families. See, London families and seniors have lower taxes, which means they have more money in their pockets to help pay for their needs and to take care of their loved ones. And an average family of four now saves some $6,600 every year in taxes. Parents with younger children are now receiving close to $2,000 each year for every child under 6 years old, and for every child from 6 to 17 years old, they are now receiving $720 for each of those children. Because we recognize that parents are the ones best able to make decisions about the care of their children. And we've introduced income splitting for working families and for seniors and save more in taxes. And do you know that we've helped remove some 400,000 seniors from the tax rolls? You might also be interested in knowing, I know there's a lot of facts, but I just want to ensure, in case some of the questions don't cover all of this, that, and this is important to all of us in this place, that we've increased healthcare funding by some 70% to the highest levels in Canadian history. So across Canada, the Prime Minister and our Governor are working hard to protect Canadians from criminals that threaten our families, our neighborhoods, and the way of life. And I think the choice has never been more clear, friends. Which party is best able to manage and protect the fragile Canadian economy in the face of global economic turmoil? Because the economy is our number one priority, and that's why we're campaigning on a positive plan over the next 4 years to create jobs, lower taxes, and balance our budget right here in London. Thank you all.
Jeff?
Well, thank you very much. That microphone is working, isn't it? Thank you so much for inviting us to the Oakridge Presbyterian Church, and Reverend Hoekstra right there for inviting us, and Paul Hubert for moderating tonight. This is a wonderful opportunity to have this right in London West, and we're all here for the same reason, because we love this country. We love this country so much that we're willing to take time out of a busy September week and sit down and listen to the platforms of all the parties that are running in this election. And that's why it's so important that you're here tonight, that we get the opportunity to tell you about our platforms. So I'm running as the Liberal candidate in London West because I am very concerned about the future of this city and the lack of opportunities and confidence that there is in this region. I care deeply about London West. My parents moved here when I was 3 years old. I grew up here, I raised my family here, not too far, just in Oakridge, and I live here now. We've always known that London is a wonderful place to raise a family. And I am so blessed to have my son and my daughter-in-law, my twin grandsons, living close by in Old South. And I want my grandsons to have the same advantages that my children had growing up, but that's eroding very quickly. We can't simply point our finger at the municipal or provincial levels of government for all of our problems. The lack of leadership in Ottawa is affecting us here in London, and it can't continue. We deserve better, and I believe a federal Liberal government has the plan to restore confidence in London West and help families thrive. A Liberal government has a 3-point plan: create jobs with the most significant infrastructure investment in Canadian history, $60 billion in new funding over the next 10 years. Grow the middle class by raising taxes on the wealthiest Canadians and cutting taxes for middle-income Canadians. And help those working hard to join the middle class by investing in essential social infrastructure including affordable housing and childcare, as well as providing more money to help families with the high cost of raising their families. I believe a Liberal government is offering the change we need at this time in Canadian history. I'm Kate Young, and I'm the federal Liberal candidate in London West, and I hope to earn your vote tonight.
I'm Dimitri, Lascaris, and I'm the candidate of the Green Party. I readily acknowledge that the odds are stacked against us, but I'm here to try to enliven this debate and try to enrich the debate. If that's all I accomplish, I'll feel that this was a great victory. And it'll be one that will serve for our democracy, and I thank you all for coming out today, because without informed consent, without active participation in the political process, our democracy will not function properly. I was born in London and spent my entire childhood here, so I've seen with my own eyes the changes that have occurred in this community over the last 50 years. I've seen how southwestern Ontario has become, as The Economist magazine in the United Kingdom said very recently, the new Rust Belt. Since 2005, Canada has lost a stunning 500,000 factory jobs. And this part of the country, as we all know, has been particularly hard hit. When I was growing up here, there were plenty of good jobs to be had. My parents came to Greece in the 1950s with no education, no high school education, no money, and no capacity to speak English. But they managed, through the opportunities presented to them as immigrants, to provide us with a secure upbringing and a fine education. I graduated from Western in 1987. I went to the University of Toronto to study law. And after obtaining my degree, I went to New York to work for a major Wall Street law firm as a securities lawyer. And that firm sent me to Paris for a few years, at which time I returned to Canada, and I joined the law firm of Siskins to found, as the partners asked me to do, a securities class action practice for the purpose of protecting investors. And at the time that I started, I was the only person doing that kind of practice in our firm. And some 10 years later, we now have 14 lawyers working on that team, and each of them is supported by multiple staff. Now, this, I hope, drives home the point that I'm one of those job creators. I know there are many more in this audience, but I'm one of those job creators that Ed Holder likes to talk about. And from my perspective, the Conservative government has too narrow a perspective on what job creators need. They think they need their taxes to be slashed to the bone so that we now have the lowest corporate tax rate in the industrialized world. And they think they need regulations. The job creators need regulations that are there to protect us to be gutted so that they can make ever more money. Well, I'm here to tell you that that's not what job creators need. What job creators need, first of all, is a highly educated population. And that means that we have to have an education system that's accessible to everybody, which is why the Green Party wants to abolish tuition. The second thing that job creators need is a world-class infrastructure so that we can deliver our products and our services to the markets in a timely and efficient way. And finally, we need to have an economy in which the polluter pays. The fact is we are confronting the defining challenge of our time. It's climate change. It is creating extreme weather events, and that is imposing enormous costs on the population, on job creators across the country. It's time to stop favoring the fossil fuels industry and make it pay for its profit-making activities. I say to you, that's what job creators need. And I thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. And thanks to Ed, the Oakridge Presbyterian Church for organizing this debate, and to Paul for moderating. My name is Matthew Rowlinson, and I'm proud to be here representing the New Democratic Party. I'm running in this election because I care deeply for the City of London and for Canada. I'm a professor of English at Western, a first-time political candidate, and I've lived in this riding since 2002. My years here have been tough ones for this city. I've seen too many plant closures, Kellogg's, Ford, and most searingly, the lockout at Electromotive Diesel, where I walked on the picket line with men and women who are trying to save their jobs. While I've been going door to door in this riding during this election, I've met Londoners laid off in those closures, some of them still looking for work, others now in low-wage service jobs. And I know that what they need, and what we all need today,
is a government that will put the people of this great city to work so we can play our part in a new, sustainable Canadian economy. Under the Conservative government, 200,000 more Canadians are out of work than before the last recession in 2008. In that time, we've lost 400,000 good-paying manufacturing jobs, family-supporting jobs. Under the Conservative government, we've been the only country to drop out of the Kyoto Accord on climate change. Mr. Harper's government has made our environmental record a national shame, and I'm here to say it's time for him to go. The Trudeau Liberals won't be clear on how they plan to fix Harper's mess. They won't say how they plan to pay for their promises, and they won't support key measures that will help families. They're campaigning against $15 a day childcare and against a $15 federal minimum wage. And instead of asking corporations to pay their fair share, Justin Trudeau is going to download billions of debt onto the next generation. They don't have a plan to address climate change. The NDP will ask corporations to pay a little bit more and will invest money in things that matter to all of us, like healthcare, childcare, infrastructure, and a secure retirement. We'll bring in a cap-and-trade plan that puts a price on carbon emissions. Tom Mulcair will kickstart our manufacturing sector with targeted investments to support innovation. We're going to support small business owners by cutting their tax rate, and we'll bring in a national $15 a day childcare program that will help today's families leave a legacy for future generations. This is a rich country. If everyone pays their fair share, we can do all this without adding to the federal deficit. All that's needed is a government with the will and with a plan for the future, and that is what I'm here tonight to offer you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, candidates. The first question is on the theme of national budget. There's been much discussion about the federal budget in this campaign, and as my grandfather used to say, show me how you spend your money, and I will tell you what is truly important to you. What will be your government's fiscal priorities, and how will you achieve them? The first speaker will be Kate Young, followed by Ed Holder, followed by Matthew, followed by Dimitri. Okay, so Kate.
Okay. Smart investments create jobs and growth. And that's what the Liberal Party of Canada is all about. Creating jobs and growth. Whereas the others are about austerity and cuts that will only slow our economy further. We have a plan to invest in this country with the largest infrastructure program in Canadian history. And this is the perfect time to invest in our country as interest rates are low, infrastructure is crumbling. I think this microphone is crumbling. Right? Testing one. Thank you. As I was saying, interest rates are low and our infrastructure is crumbling, and it's so important for us to do something about this and to get the jobs moving again. And when I talk about infrastructure, I'm talking about public transit infrastructure, working with municipalities, making sure the municipalities decide how this money will be spent, social infrastructure, so that could be affordable housing or seniors facilities or childcare. Or green infrastructure, which is providing funding for local water and wastewater facilities, clean energy. The list goes on. So we are opening it up. There are so many different things that we could do across the country. Each municipality has different things. We might want to get rid of the rail traffic downtown, if that's something the municipality wants, or rapid transit. There are so many different things we know that the municipality is in need of for this money. So that is the major way that we will be spending, and we will be increasing jobs by investing in infrastructure. Thank you.
you for the question. You know, a balanced budget is the foundation of the Conservative Party's economic plan. But let me take you back not that many years ago, when we all experienced the worst recession in our lifetimes. And as a result of that experience, what we did is that we put in temporary measures that took the budget out of balance, and significantly. But we did that as we matched countries around the world in the industrialized world to ensure that we would not fall into depression, something that my parents, and I'm sure many of your parents, experienced. So we made that decision, and you'll recall the reference shovel-ready, because what we did is we worked with municipalities across the country in conjunction with the provinces. We ensured that we were going to keep Canadians working. That is so, so critical. And what it says to us is that when all you have to do is look at Greece and the downturn in the stock market in China to understand that we live in a very fragile global economy, which is precisely why we need a national government focused on job creation, growing our economy, and lowering taxes for Canadians. Because as we've now been in the position to balance our budget, we are now in a stronger position to help families budget theirs. We've done that in many ways. The plan that we have put in place, and that in fact we have lived through, has seen a universal child care benefit that provides significant benefits to families across this country, income splitting for working families that the Liberals and NDP have said that they will eliminate, and income splitting for seniors, which the Liberals and the NDP voted against. So I share that with you so that you have some sense of what's there, but I would come back to the point that a balanced budget is the critical piece that will sustain the growth that we have. And by the way, the 1.3 million net new jobs have been created since 2009. Thank you.
I'm going to stick with this mic. Thank you. The question is about fiscal priorities. The fiscal priority of the NDP government will be to begin by undoing some of the damage that has been done over the last 2 decades to our shared cultural and social infrastructure. Our healthcare system is creaking at the seams. We currently have extraordinarily long wait times, in some cases for essential surgeries. We currently have not enough beds for psych patients who are being discharged without ever having been seen. We have seniors who, for lack of home care, are taking up beds in our hospitals. The NDP's first priority will be to reverse some of Mr. Harper's cuts to health care. And Tom Mulcair, unlike Mr. Harper, will sit down with the premiers and once again make the federal government a player in our healthcare system. Other areas of our shared social services that are suffering include housing and infrastructure. This country used to have a national housing strategy. It came to an end during the Paul Hubert government a decade ago. We need a national housing strategy again. We need a national housing strategy so that young people can afford to live in our big cities. We need a national housing strategy to end the scourge of people living without homes, which we see here in London. We can build these things with the resources that we have available to us. We also need to support our cultural infrastructure. And I think time is running out. I wanted to say something about the CBC and about the Post Office, 2 of our pivotal national institutions that are at risk. All of these things will be priorities for the NDP, and we will use money that will raise by small taxes to heal those institutions, to build new institutions that will work for all of us, and to do so without reducing an unbalanced budget. Thank you.
I couldn't agree more with my friend Matthew Rowlinson's suggestion that homelessness is a scourge in this country, and in one of the wealthiest countries in the world, there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for poverty in this country. We can eliminate poverty, and the Green Party makes it its top priority to introduce a guaranteed livable income, so that you actually can survive in terms of paying your rent, paying your food, and that will allow us to eliminate poverty in this country, and that's exactly what we can and should do. You should know that when people who are living out of the poverty line are given money to spend, they will spend it all. They have to spend it all, and that stimulates economic activity. When you give tax breaks to the rich, they don't need to spend the money. They can park it, for example, offshore, someplace where they can get more attractive returns. And therefore, that money is not used here at home in order to stimulate the economy. So guaranteed livable income is key. The other thing we want to do is we want to introduce carbon pricing, so that the costs of carbon pollution are fully incorporated into the price of oil. And that is going to incentivize private sector to invest massively in renewable energy, because that will become more competitive as a result of the carbon pricing. And that will create an enormous number of jobs. In Germany, 370,000 people are directly employed in the renewable energy sector, and here the number is less than 24,000 people. We're barely scraping the surface. We want to invest in infrastructure. We want to put 1 point of GST, or $6.4 billion a year, towards municipal infrastructure. And we can pay for all of this by raising the corporate tax rate. It's 15%. It's less than half that it is in the United States. It's the lowest in the industrialized world. We want to take it up to 19% to fund these vitally important programs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next question has been touched on by a number, but will be more specific. It's around sustainable infrastructure. 80% of Canadians live in major urban centers, and many of our suburbs are expanding rapidly. This growth puts added pressure on roads, services, and adjacent farmland. At the same time, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities claims that we need an additional $200 billion to repair the existing infrastructure and fund new projects. This gap leaves us vulnerable to everything from aging bridges to extreme weather events. How will your party ensure that Canada's cities are resilient and sustainable? Okay. So the order on this question begins with Dimitri, followed by Matthew, followed by Ed, and lastly Kate. Okay.
Whatever you like.
Well,
James.
Well, I talked to you about the Sustainable Development Fund, the 1 point of GST that we want to contribute to municipal infrastructure, and our carbon pricing, which is a critical part of our plan. But really, if we want to talk about sustainable lifestyles in this country, we have to come to grips with the fact that we are on the verge of a climate crisis, and that has to be our top priority. The science is in, and that science says quite clearly that the majority of oil must be left in the ground. And I was quite disappointed when a person for whom I have a great deal of respect, Linda McQuaig, a candidate of the NDP in Toronto, recognized this simple scientific fact on national television, that we have to leave the majority of the oil in the ground. The leadership of the NDP effectively threw her under the bus and said that that does not constitute part of our platform. So what the NDP is telling us is that science does not constitute part of our platform. Doing what is necessary to protect the future of our children does not constitute part of our platform. Honesty to the public does not constitute part of our platform. We must leave the majority of that oil in the ground. We can do it, and we are here telling you, the Green Party, that we will do it.
Infrastructure maintenance begins at the municipalities. They own 60% of our public infrastructure. They only get 8 cents out of every tax dollar. We have an enormous infrastructure debt as a result of many decades of downloading of infrastructure maintenance onto our municipalities. We see from the Liberal Party, we see a promise of grand plans. If the municipalities want to bury the railways, then maybe we'll do that. The NDP has a much simpler proposition. We will remit 1% of the existing gas tax that is now taken by the federal government, and we will remit that to the municipalities for infrastructure construction and maintenance. This is a measure that the city councillors I've spoken to have asked me for, and apparently have been asking for many years. So to begin with, we need to give municipalities the resources they need to maintain the infrastructure that we have. We need above all to support public transit in this country. For the reasons that Dimitri has adduced, our car-intensive economy, and here in Southwest Ontario, it has gotten harder and harder to get around without a car because of cutbacks to rail and bus service. our car-intensive transit system has to be phased out, and it has to be replaced by an effective transit system. The current City Council has made some terrific proposals in that direction, and an NDP government will be a strong partner for municipalities as they build out a sustainable infrastructure. More broadly, we need to build a sustainable and integrated transit infrastructure for the whole of Southwest Ontario. Earlier this year, I was at a terrific meeting by an organization called the Southwest Ontario Transit Alliance, who proposed an affordable, sustainable, integrated bus and rail system for Ontario, for this part of Ontario, using existing track and a second repurposed rolling stock. It's a wonderful idea, and I would love to be an advocate for it in Ottawa.
Thanks very much. I think that's an important question. As it relates to municipal structure relative to the federal government's role in all of that, we don't ignore that the municipalities, which are a creature of the provinces, have their responsibility. In fact, they work hand in hand, which is why one of the programs that we've had in place, the Building Canada Fund, joins the opportunities that municipalities have in working with the provinces. I'll just tell you a bit about that, and I'd like to touch on the gas tax fund, if you'd allow me, because that's a significant part of infrastructure funding. We have launched already, put in place the largest federal infrastructure plan in Canada's history. Over the next 10 years, our government will invest some $80 billion in Canada's infrastructure. No other federal government has made those levels of investment. And we've done this without raising taxes and while balancing the budget. And the mayor and I have spoken about this issue, particularly as it relates to the public transit program that some parts of the municipality are looking to put forward, the SHIFT program. And should the municipality come back to us with support from the province, they would be eligible under the Building Canada Fund. So we put that in place, and that's very important for municipalities to know they have access to that. In addition to that, I recall standing with actually Irene Matheson and with Glenn Pearson back when we held up a sign for the amount of money that was going to come up at that time to support infrastructure to avoid depression. But I also recall a couple of mayors ago, that said to me, if you would make the gas tax permanent, that's all we would ever want you to do. Well, the gas tax, we made permanent, we doubled it, we indexed it, we made it more flexible, and what it now means is that over the last 10 years, some $90 million have gone to the city, and that represents now, this year, some $21.7 million that will go to the city to help them do that. Thank you.
Well, I think I've talked a bit about the infrastructure program that the Liberal Party of Canada wants to bring on side and work with the municipalities. The money that we would give to the municipalities would flow down through the province, similar to the gas tax. But I didn't want to let something go by that my Conservative friend here mentioned that he knows is wrong, and I have to call him out for it, because he said that the Liberals were against income splitting for seniors. That is not true, and we have continually underscored that we are in favor of income splitting for seniors. It is something that we're hearing on the doorstep, and it's bothersome when we keep hearing something and we keep hearing that the Conservatives say that we're against it when we're not. So I did want to call them out on that. I also wanted to mention about our fair tax system, because it's so important that we cut taxes for middle-income Canadians and deliver a bigger, fair, tax-free monthly check called the Canada Child Benefit. Canadians with taxable income between about $44,000 and $90,000 per year will have their taxes decreased from 22% to about 20.5%. And unlike Harper and Mulcair, we will stop giving child benefit checks to the very wealthy. The Canada Child Benefit, 9 out of 10 Canadian families will receive tax-free checks every month, and and that's up to $6,400 per child each year. This will lift 315,000 Canadian children out of poverty, and we will get more money in the pockets of more Canadians. We will increase taxes for the top 1% of Canadians, and that's how we're going to pay for this. We know that the top 1% of Canadians have done very well over the past 10 years and are willing to give back more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next question is to jobs and economic growth. We all know that Southern Ontario was hard hit by the recession in 2008, particularly our area, and our economy is restructuring. How will your government invest in the local economy in order to ensure jobs and growth? We'll start this question with Mr. Holder, followed by Kate, Matthew, and Dimitri. Kate, Dimitri, and Matthew.
Well, as I answer the question, I just want to respond to Kate's comment. The reason that I made the reference to Justin Trudeau being against income splitting for seniors is because he voted against it. So we'll see what the future brings. So, the question...
We're not going to move. We're going to let the candidate express. Okay? Thank you.
Canada has one of the best job creation records in the G7. And we're leading in GDP growth, and we've done that since the recession. But under our plan of low taxes, balanced budget, and economic growth, we put 1.3 million net new jobs in place that have been created since the recession. And we announced just recently the plan based on our low tax plan to add another 1.3 million jobs by 2020. You know, it's interesting, Mr. Trudeau's economic advisors called our jobs commitment aggressive, but they called it achievable. And I think that's very promising. I would also add that when you look at the contrast of ourselves with the other parties, the Liberals announced they're going to run multi-million-dollar deficits. They're going to do that over several years. What else can you do but taxes to pay for those promises? And my concern, honestly, is that those deficits and tax hikes will leave our fragile economy exposed. It'll cost us money and has the potential to risk jobs. Whereas the NDP is promising billions, and while they say they're going to be balancing the budget, and I think that's hopeful, they have no plan to pay for it. So taxes, as a result, go up. And, you know, it's interesting, we never always get along with the parliamentary budget officer, but he says that their costing is difficult. But I say that from our standpoint, we feel that we have weathered this recession through low taxes. We intend to carry on as we balance the budget and continue with the low tax regimen for Londoners and for all Canadians. Thank you.
Hello. Well, as I've said twice now, we think that we need to invest massively in the infrastructure in this country. And I personally am a big fan of the SHIFT program, a program that is designed to bring rapid transit to the city. It's an idea whose time has come. It will create employment, it will make our economy more efficient, and we should take advantage of the skilled workforce that we have here, the fact that we have a university here, a very educated population in order to become a leader in the renewable energy industry. That is going to be the energy of the future, whether we want it or not. Eventually that resource out in Alberta will run out even if we consume every last drop. So why should we wait? Why shouldn't we take the advantages of the community that we have here to become that leader in renewable energy? And I want to take a moment, however, to add this about balanced budgets, because a lot is being said about balanced budgets. And let me preface this by saying that I wholeheartedly support the notion of fiscal discipline. But Canada does not have a debt problem, people. Okay, we have a lower debt to GDP ratio than Japan, than the United States. We have a lower debt to GDP ratio than the United Kingdom and France. In January of this year, we issued a 10-year bond at the lowest interest rate in history, 1.14%. Why? Because the investing public believes that we are very, very good credit. It is therefore economic malpractice for us to be prioritizing the balancing of a budget in a recession, a conservative-made recession. organization, an independent news organization called Real News, and I've been covering the austerity in Greece and in Europe at large. And it has had devastating effects, and we are presented by a mountain of evidence looking at the European experience that prioritizing the balancing of a budget in recessionary conditions is economic malpractice. Let's learn that lesson, and let's lift our country out of that recession first. Thank you.
So much to respond to. Let me begin, briefly by mentioning something that Ed said. He cited the Parliamentary Budget Officer's response to our fully costed economic plan. He had some reservations about it, but the plan used the Parliamentary Budget Officer's own numbers, and it has been approved by 2 presidents of the Canadian Economic Association. The reason I mentioned that, and the reason that Kevin Page was able to make that comment that Ed alluded to, is that the NDP is the only one of the parties on this stage that has released a fully costed fiscal plan for its first mandate. So, our plan is out there. You should look at the numbers. And the question about whether or not it's desirable for Canada to be running budget deficits is one of the key questions that you will have to face in this election. Dimitri has made the case that we can and should go on, and Kate as well have made the case that we can and should go on running deficits. Now you need to remember that thanks to conservative, opaque reporting, we actually don't know how many deficits we've run lately. It's at least 6 out of the last few years. Probably they managed to run surplus, they claim to have run surpluses in each of the year when there was an election. But somewhere between 6 and 8 of our last federal budgets have been deficit budgets. We cannot go on running deficit budgets forever. John Maynard Keynes advocated cyclical spending, deficit spending during a crisis, and surpluses during the good times. We're between those 2 points now. The question was about jobs. I'll just close by remembering something. The federal government, Stephen Harper came here with a $5 million check for electromotive diesel, the company I mentioned in my introduction, during the last election campaign. That was in 2011, I think 2011. 2 years later, that company locked out its workers and moved all those jobs and a lot of intellectual property to Indiana. Giving tax breaks and subsidies to big corporations is not the way to create jobs and is not the road the NDP will follow.
Thank you very much. We're going to shift gears a little bit, and I have to preface it by a celebration a little. I'm sorry, could you? My apologies, Kate.
Thank you very much. I thought, okay. Well, I think we got mixed up with the names. Anyway, no problem. I did want to mention, though, about manufacturing and how it remains such a significant part of the southwestern Ontario economy. But we must recognize that manufacturing jobs are declining. And we need to encourage economic growth in other areas like innovation and high tech and digital, all of the areas that London is so good at in the city's strength in the health and science and research sector. And we're not talking about that. Now, I know that the Tories announced a manufacturing fund earlier this week in Windsor, and I thought that was very brave of them to do that in Windsor. And, but it's not going to be available until 2017, 2018, and we need to do something now. We need a national manufacturing strategy to boost jobs, to boost job prospects in southwestern Ontario now. We need the federal government to talk to the provinces, to talk to the municipalities, to get us all working together so that we can figure out how to get more jobs in southwestern Ontario. Not only in London West, because we know that the people who live in London West work in other areas. And we know, we've already heard about Ford and Kellogg's. We know people. I go door to door and I hear from people who have lost their jobs and have really nothing left. And they're at the point where they're having to put their homes up for sale and move out of London West because they can't afford to stay here. We have to do something, and it's not good enough to listen to the Conservative government say that they have done enough. They haven't. They've had 10 years, and it's not working. We need real change.
So now let's shift the discussion to the international stage. I think we all celebrate that there's a Canadian coming home that was part today in Egypt, and I think we can celebrate that. So the question is this: Canada on the world stage. What are the two most critical issues for Canada internationally, and how would your party address them? What are the two most critical issues internationally for Canada, and how would your party address them? This time we'll start with Matthew, followed by Dimitri, then we'll go to Kate and Ed. I think.
Just two. Let me, with respect to Paul, begin with the big picture. Canada's reputation internationally has suffered enormously over the last decade and a half. It suffered because we did not take seriously our responsibilities under the Kyoto Accord when the Liberals were in power, and we left that accord under the Conservatives. We have abandoned our historic responsibility, we have abandoned our historic military work of peacekeeping. We used to be the world's #1 contributor of forces to UN peacekeeping troops. We are now well down in the 60s. We contribute essentially no troops to peacekeeping work. So, as a result of that, our reputation in the world is lower than it's ever been in my lifetime. We were, for the first time, I think, ever non-elected to a seat on the Security Council. So we need to get back to our tradition of internationalism. And that should govern, to begin with, the ways in which we deploy Canadian forces abroad. We are currently engaged in a mission in Syria and Iraq that has no sanction from an international body. It's not a UN mission, it's not a NATO mission, it is us in the US freelancing. We don't know what the aims of that mission are. There's been no stated criteria for success or failure, and we should bring those troops home. And an NDP government. Part of restoring Canada's reputation on the international stage will be stepping up, as we have always done in the past, and having a humane refugee policy. This country, almost all of us here are immigrants or descended from immigrants. This country has always stepped up when there are refugees who needed safety. We will, an NDP government, will do as the UN asks and take 10,000 refugees by the end of the year and 9,000 in each successive year.
Last year was the hottest year on the planet in more than 35 years of record keeping. 6 out of the first 8 months of this year were the hottest months on the planet. If we break the record this year for the hottest year on the planet, and we're on course to smash it, then 3 of the hottest years on record will have occurred within the last 5 years. Peer-reviewed studies show that we have to leave the majority of the oil in the ground to stay within the 2 degrees Celsius margin. We're at 0.9 degrees now, and we're already seeing very severe effects across the planet. And a lot of people think that 2 degrees is too high. There are island states that are going to disappear under rising sea levels at a temperature increase that is significantly beneath that. And what do we have in this country? We have a government that has actively obstructed meaningful climate change action, and it is an absolute disgrace. I must say that I am ashamed, Mr. Holder, that my government has been the principal impediment to the defining challenge of our time being resolved. I have 2 children. They're in this audience. I'm not saying this to score political points. You're jeopardizing our children's future, and I resent that. And I want this government now, and we need a government now to come forward and deal with this crisis. And the other thing I want to say about the international stage is we've become a warmongering nation, and this must stop. The greatness of this country lies down the path of peace, not down the path of war. Only Elizabeth May voted against the Libyan disaster. That country is now a failed state. There is now a major foothold for Islamic State within that country where there wasn't before. It is exacerbating a historic refugee crisis in the Mediterranean, the collapse of that state. Only she stood against it. None of these candidates wants to talk about Libya. But I'm grateful to hear my friend Mr. Rowlinson talk about Syria and Iraq, because we should get out of there right now. And we shouldn't be spending $44 billion of hard-earned taxpayer money. You keep saying you want to put that money back in our pockets. Why are you spending $44 billion of taxpayer money on a lemon?
I think I have to agree very firmly with the two other candidates. The Harper government's handling of the Syrian refugee crisis has been embarrassing. I have, the last 3 weeks, and you know, we all know, I'm not going to even mention the picture, but we know what it is. It's burned on everybody's brain. And we can't let this happen. We can't just say that it's okay to turn a blind eye to what is going on the other side of the world. I know we've done it before. I know we're not always perfect, but we should know better. And I was so distraught to know that our government was not going to raise a finger to help until we just kept making them realize that the majority of Canadians wanted us to do something. And of course we're going to check to make sure that the refugees from Syria pass security checks. Of course we're going to do that. But that doesn't mean that we can't take them, and take them quickly. And so we, the Liberal Party, wants to take in 25,000 refugees from Syria and do it as quickly as possible. And we can do it as quickly as possible. It is all about what we want to do and what we're willing to do. And our government right now isn't willing to do enough. The environment, of course, is another major problem that I have with the Conservative government. They have failed miserably on the environment portfolio, and that has slowed our economy. Stephen Harper doesn't seem to realize that the two go hand in hand, the economy and the environment. Nobel Prize winner Dr. Gordon McBain, who is here tonight, has endorsed my campaign. He is one of the scientists that is being muzzled at the University of Western Ontario, and there are so many scientists who are in the same situation, and we have got to make sure that they can start talking about the research that they're doing. Thank you.
So Paul, if I recall the question, it was, what are the two primary issues that impact Canada on the world stage? I think one, as it relates to all of us, is the issue of international security. We have no greater responsibility than to keep Canadians safe. The second is the issues around the economy, and that's where it relates to international free trade. We've signed some 39 free trade agreements since we've been elected. We're in the process of putting them in place, but that means jobs for Canadians, and we think that that's important. The issue of Syria has been touched on. And no one has been more impacted by me than that picture of that little boy, because I know what it is to lose a son. But let me tell you this, that Syrian crisis did not start with that little boy's death. As tragic and absolutely horrible as it is, and we all felt that. It's been going on for years. In fact, formally 4 years of the Syrian war. But I'd like to at least applaud the Oakridge Presbyterian Church, and I know there are other houses of worship around the city that are considering sponsoring refugee families. So how we responded to that. We have one of the most generous immigration and refugee systems in the world. Let me explain what that is. We believe there's a three-part response to this. Refugee resettlement, absolutely. Providing humanitarian aid at the source, and confronting ISIL militarily. We think those are the three steps that are necessary. We've actually resettled some 25,000 Iraqi and Syrian refugees since 2009. They're already here. And what we have done is that we have announced sensible measures, we think, to speed up the processing of those refugees outstanding. Did you know that Canada resettles somewhere between 11 and 13,000 refugees every year? That's about 1 in 10 of every refugee that gets settled. We've contributed some $750 million of humanitarian aid in Syria now, And frankly, if you don't confront ISIS, then frankly, they'll bring that problem home right here to Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is in the area of health and housing. Some would say that the gap between rich and poor is increasing in Canada. How would your party ensure that all Canadians have access to quality health care and affordable housing? The order this time begins with Kate, followed by Ed, Matthew, and Dimitri. Kate?
Thank you, Paul. For too long, the federal government has washed its hands of the healthcare issue, and I think that we need to have the federal government take a leadership role in healthcare and immediately hold a First Minister's meeting to re-engage and collaborate with the premiers and with the provinces and the territories and the Aboriginal people as well, to transform and sustain our healthcare system. There are so many problems with our healthcare system, and unless we start talking about the problems, I can't imagine we know what it's like for our seniors today. We have to start thinking, what is it going to be like when we're seniors? And it's just crumbling, a bit like our infrastructure, and we need to do something about it right away. We have to tackle the wait times and the strengthening community-based care. I know that's a big issue. Senior care, mental health, and the prescription drug coverage as well. And it's of course our party's core belief that our healthcare system must continue to be publicly funded and of high quality, but it's slipping badly and slipping very quickly. We haven't had a First Minister's meeting until since 2009. That's 6 years since the premiers have met under the Harper government, and that's just really inexcusable. As far as housing is concerned, safe, adequate, and affordable housing is essential to building a strong community and a strong economy. Today, 1 in 4 Canadian households is paying more than they can afford for housing, or more than the recommended limit of 30% of income. Without affordable housing, many Canadians simply cannot make ends meet, and that is why the Liberal government will restore federal leadership on affordable housing by investing in a comprehensive national housing strategy that will provide $125 million per year in tax incentives to increase and substantially renovate the supply of rental housing across Canada.
I think what we need to clarify, if we can, Paul, is what the role of the federal government, what the role of the province is to do with healthcare funding. As we know, provinces are responsible for the delivery of healthcare. So how has the federal government responded? What we have done is that we have increased healthcare transfers to every province since 2006. Now that was a couple of years before I was elected. So what does that mean even here in Ontario? In 2015-16, the government of Ontario is going to receive $13.1 billion in health transfers alone. That's an increase of $5.4 billion going back from 2005-06. I share that with you because these are the highest health transfer dollars that have ever been put in place in Canadian history. We've done that consistently year over year. And we've done that as well, ladies and gentlemen, while also balancing the budget. So since forming government, health transfers to all the provinces have increased by some 70%. Now I'm going to put a little contrast in that. When the Liberal government before was elected and was able to balance their budget, did you know they did that by slashing healthcare transfers by 30%? And you know there wasn't one province of Ontario that applauded the Liberals in that transfer and their ability to balance the budget because of the impact that it had. We will never, as Conservatives, balance the books of Canada by cutting health transfers. We will never do that. In addition to that, as far as affordable housing, again, it's a provincial and a related federal issue. Our commitment in 2015 reaffirmed our commitment to significant funding, for example, to co-ops, and we've helped more than 226,000 new affordable housing units and renewed the homelessness partnering strategy. But you do that in conjunction with your provinces to make sure, because you know what my Cape Breton mom said? She said, a community is measured how well we take care of those who are less able to take care of themselves. And I sincerely understand that. Thank you.
Mr. Holder, Stephen Harper has announced that he will cut tens of billions of dollars in healthcare transfers to the provinces over between now and 2020. If there's a Conservative government re-elected, those cuts will come. We must stop them. The Conservatives have also announced that they would like to get the federal government entirely out of the business of supporting affordable housing or social housing in this country. We used to have, back in the 70s, we had a commitment to the idea that housing was a right for all Canadians. The NDP will make that our policy once again. We will re-establish a national housing strategy and treat housing like the crisis that it is. Our national housing, the last national housing strategy we had was abolished under Paul Martin's government. Currently, the only support that the provinces and municipalities get for social housing comes through mortgage support from the CMHC. We need support for co-op housing. We need support for rental housing. We need a government that will work with the municipalities to build housing, build social housing, to build affordable housing for our young people. And once again, we're dealing with two huge topics in a very short period of time. But once again, we need the federal government to be re-engaged in the issue of healthcare. Mr. Harper allowed the Canada Health Accords to lapse in, I think it was 2013, and since then he has refused to meet with the premiers. And the consequence of that has been that healthcare policy in this country, first of all, availability of healthcare in this country has been declining, and that each of the provinces has been going off in its own direction. The promise of universality that is built into the Canada Health Act is at risk today. And we must, once again, have a federal government that is engaged in health policy, that will offer initiatives like the Health Innovation Fund. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
I agree wholeheartedly with Matthew that we need a national housing strategy in this country. We need to provide the funding necessary to eliminate homelessness. Homelessness is a scar on the conscience of this country. And furthermore, we plan to help people in positions of poverty to find affordable accommodation through a guaranteed livable income. That is an idea whose time has come in this country. I want to say something about those who claim that they're going to be providing additional funding for healthcare. You don't get to fall over yourselves, liberals and conservatives, over a period of 20 years cutting taxes in this country on large corporations to the point where it's the lowest in the industrialized world, and then claim magically you're going to come up with the money to fund the healthcare system. It's just not going to happen. It's pie in the sky. Again, they like to tell us they're going to put money back in our pockets. What they don't tell you is that starving the government of essential resources to provide essential services, and one day you're going to have to go to the private sector to get those same resources or those same services. And that private sector is going to charge you a lot more than the government, because the private sector is a profit-seeking enterprise and the government is not. So you end up pulling that money out of your pocket in spades and then some in order to get healthcare, which is precisely what the American people are doing. The American people are paying far more money for their health care because it is being provided by the private sector and there is not a public option available to them, a serious public option, and that's where we're heading. And in order to solve the problem, we have to stop cutting taxes on those who have the ability to fund essential services, including and above all healthcare in this country. And if the Liberals are serious about that, then they would be in favor of raising the corporate tax rate, but they don't want to raise it, even though it's at a historic low. They're saying they're going to raise taxes on the top 1%. Yes, the top 1% from 29 to 33%. That's chump change. We need serious money in order to restore our healthcare service to the world-class standard that Canadians deserve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That ends the sort of thematic round, if you will. I need the box of questions that was out in the foyer. All we have done with this is remove ones that were, you know, if you want to know about the pothole on Wellington Road, talk to me afterwards. The candidates previously have asked that even if a question is directed to a particular party, that they all have an opportunity to respond to the question. So I'm going to departisan, if you will, the question and make it, not just to the NDP or the Green or whatever, okay? And so this is random. We only have an opportunity. It was also supposed to be that I can read it. I can't read it. Okay, here's the question. This is a little bit of repetitiveness, so it is how will they work to regain Canada's status on the world stage, read the environment, immigration, and foreign aid. So if you want to maybe rebut, you have 1 minute, and I'll look to, at this time, I will start with Dimitri. This is an opportunity if you want to add something or rebut something further, followed by Matthew, followed by Ed, and then Kate. Okay, Dimitri.
Well, the number one place to start in restoring our reputation internationally is going to be, the number one opportunity will be provided to us in December, when the leaders of nations from around the world are going to assemble in Paris for a pivotal conference to finally try to tackle the problem of climate change, the defining crisis of our time. That's what it is. That's what the UN Secretary General called it. And we need to get our heads out of the tar sands and wake up to that bald reality. So let's send a delegation led by Elizabeth May, a real champion of the fight against climate change, to Paris and set the standard for the rest of the world.
You substitute Tom Mulcair's name for Elizabeth May, and I pretty much agree with what Dimitri said. We need a real environmentalist at the Paris conference this December. It's going to be a pivotal event in world history, and the decisions that are made there will determine whether or not we can stay with the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's recommended limit for the increase in global temperatures of 2 degrees Celsius. Beyond that, they say we are at civilizational risk. Remaining within that limit is going to be a difficult task. The NDP is committed to bringing in a cap-and-trade plan to begin to address Canada's responsibilities to step up. Quebec and the state of California already have a cap-and-trade plan. They're working together because Quebec couldn't find partners in Canada. We need a national policy. It's not going to be a silver bullet that will meet our responsibilities in this area, but it's a beginning, and it will enable Tom to go to that meeting in December and engage with the other countries in the global community and begin to make a serious attempt to address this question.
So the question related to Canada's place in the world again, look, we live in the greatest country in the world. We all know that. And in fact, that was reconfirmed when a couple of months ago we were ranked as the most admired country. There's some other things that are important, I think, that certainly seem as a member of government that are important to Canadians, and that we have the best job creation record in the G7, that we have Canada leading the G7 in the world in terms of real gross domestic product. I mentioned earlier the free trade agreements that have been signed as well, and I would tell you that Canada stands proudly and firmly beside the people of Ukraine as they struggle against their battles against Vladimir Putin. So those are some of the issues around leadership that we do in terms of taking our place in the world.
We talked about the Paris conference on climate change when Peter Mansbridge asked Justin Trudeau what would be the first thing that he would do when he became Prime Minister. He said he would get people together to talk and figure out who's going to go to this Paris conference. It's that important. It is so important to be there. And it's essential that we tackle the climate problem, because if we can't tackle the climate problem, there won't be anything left for us on Earth. So that is the most important. I did want to question something that Mr. Holder said when he mentioned about the Syrian refugee crisis. He said, it's been going on for 4 years. It's not new. And my question is, why hasn't the Conservative government done something? before now.
Okay, the next question is, we only have about 10 minutes more before closing statements, so I want us to get as many questions in as possible. So, the next question is very different. The question is this: name 3 or 4 different charities that you or your family actively support. Now, I'm going to ask the question, and I want us to be respectful here, because if the candidate prefers to say that's my personal business, I'm actively involved, I think we need to be respectful of that. However, if the candidate would like to answer that, that's fair enough as well. I'll start with Mr. Holder, followed by Kate, Dimitri, and then Matthew. Okay?
Thanks. My mom always said that community service is the price you pay to live in a place, and I guess that's why I got involved in politics 7 years ago after being in business. It's on my website if you can't sleep tonight. Take a look. I've been involved in some almost 60 community groups since I moved back to London in 1981. I've gone to Western here. And currently, I'll just talk about a couple of the current ones if I can, because again, if you're interested, you can. But again, it ties back to that commitment to service. So I am the co-chair of the Business Cares Food Drive that we do, and it's the largest food drive that is run, and I work with Wayne Dunn and Glenn Pearson and Jerry Roy on that. I co-chair the New Year's Eve at Vic Park. It's kind of a fun thing where some 20,000 folks do a family-funded free event. I'm the patron of St. John Ambulance, because I think that's an important commitment to make. They do phenomenal work right across the country. And I'm a Rotarian, and I'm going to stop. So, thanks.
I'll just mention the top 3. I think all of us give a lot of money to a lot of different organizations, but for me, the United Way of London and Middlesex, because it helps so many people. So I give a monthly donation to the United Way, and I'm sure most people here do. Jesse's Journey is near and dear to my heart, because John Davidson has been a close friend of mine for so long, and I followed him on that journey. I didn't walk with him, believe me, maybe one day. And also Museum London. My son is an artist, and my partner is the executive director at Museum London, and the arts are very near and dear to my heart, and so I give a monthly donation there as well.
I both contribute to and sit on the board of Toronto350.org, the Toronto chapter of an excellent organization called 350.org, founded by Bill McKibben, a world-famous climate activist. I had the privilege of presenting a divestment petition to the University of Toronto president in March of last year, asking that the university divest its $1.8 billion endowment for fossil fuels, and the committee has been struck to study that proposal. I sit on the board of and support the Unity Project for the Relief of Homelessness in London, one of the finest charitable organizations I've ever had the privilege to work with, and I hope to put them out of business one day by ending homelessness in this country, or at least assisting the government to do so. I support and have been active in Environmental Defence, a Toronto-based organization which, as its name implies, is trying to defend the environment. And lastly, I sit on the board of and support, and I should say it's not just me, it's also my wife who's in the audience, Real News Network, an independent viewer-supported network that doesn't accept corporate or government donations, because we feel that skews the truth, the presentation of the truth, and independent media is critical to the lifeblood of our democracy.
I had the benefit of asking Paul to repeat the questions. I hadn't heard it. It was actually apparently named 3. Much of my giving to local charities is done through the United Way. I do also support the Unity Project, which is a terrific organization. Internationally, I support Doctors Without Borders and a number of other international relief organizations. I wouldn't want to put in a plug. I have just lately, my last significant donation was to one of the local churches, no matter which one, because there are lots of them, that is sponsoring a refugee family from Syria. And I urge all of you to put your hands in your pockets and do everything you can to support their religious organizations. The city is now involved in sponsoring Syrian refugees. So that's something I've lately given to.
Oh, we have one final question, and it's a yes or no question, and that's why we can squeeze it in. We're trying to get politicians to answer something in a yes and no. Well, we'll see how it goes, okay? And it's an intentional question because it asks the question, will you try to abolish the Senate? A complex question. So on a yes or no basis, okay, and understand it's a try to abolish the Senate. We'll go firstly to the NDP candidate, followed by the Green candidate, over to the Liberal candidate, and finally the Conservative candidate. So yes or no answer.
I don't need one for very long. The answer to this question, as far as the NDP is concerned, is yes. We will do everything we can to abolish the Senate.
Yes.
Well, this is a question I need time to explain. The answer is no.
If it can't be reformed, abolish it.
Okay, not bad in terms of short answers, so let's give them a full marks for that. Okay, it's 7 minutes to 9, and as I said, some of the candidates have another commitment this evening, so we're going to try and hold fairly closely. They have 2 minutes for their closing remarks. These were also drawn in, previously, so we're going to start with Matthew from the NDP, followed by Ed from the Conservatives, and then Kate, and then finally Dimitri. Matthew, 2 minutes.
Thank you. And thanks again to every one of you for taking the time to be here tonight. To those of you who put questions in, whether we got to them or not, it's a really important contribution you're making to the process. And I know you're going to have a tough decision on October the 19th. I've been canvassing this riding now since I was selected as a candidate at the end of February. An important part of the electoral process that I wasn't really aware of before I began is the education of the candidate. And that's, as much as anything, what canvassing is about. I have met many of you in this room, thousands and thousands of people in the riding, and listened. And what I want to say to you above all in closing is that if elected, I will keep doing that. Listening to the constituents and understanding what their issues are is the most important thing an MP can do. Whether it's kickstarting the manufacturing sector, helping small business, investing in local infrastructure, or building a national childcare program, or increasing retirement security, I am proud to be running with Tom Mulcair's NDP. We have a workable plan to help London families. We'll balance the budget, stimulate the economy, and create jobs by asking corporations to pay a bit more, just to pay their fair share. Justin Trudeau won't. Only Tom Mulcair and the NDP have the leadership and experience to make the changes we need in this country. We've had 148 years of Liberal and Conservative governments, and over the last 2 decades, our society has become more unequal, we've lost hundreds of thousands of good jobs, and we've become less able to care for seniors, the poor, the sick, and the homeless. The NDP is a party unlike Liberals and Conservatives. It was founded by working men and women, and for its whole history, it has fought for a society where we take care of each other. This year, we can elect our first NDP government. Tom Mulcair is ready, I am ready, and we are asking for your support on October the 19th.
Thanks. Firstly, may I please thank everyone here tonight, particularly the Oakridge Presbyterian Church for hosting us tonight. I hope that you felt that this had value as we exchanged our views. It seems to me as we go into this election, it's becoming clear that there is a choice. And that is that our Conservatives' #1 priority is the economy. It's why we have that low tax plan for jobs and growth that we've talked about. And under our plan, 1.3 million net new jobs have been created, and we will create another 1.3 million new jobs by 2020. And let me be clear, that's the job creators. We create the environment so that the job creators will create that. And we do not do that by taxing job creators the way that you've heard tonight. That's why we've lowered taxes and increased benefits for London families, seniors, job creators, and we will continue that. And we've done this all, ladies and gentlemen, while balancing the budget. And now that we've balanced the budget, we're in a position to help Canadian families balance theirs. And I believe that amid the global economic turmoil, your choices have real consequences. The wrong government decision on taxes, spending, or deficits can upset our fragile economy, causing business closures, downsizing, and job losses right here in our cities. Our friends from Liberals have said that they will run their multi-billion-dollar deficits over several years. They've declared that. Well, they'll also raise taxes to pay for those promises. But my concern is that the deficits and tax hikes will leave our economy exposed, cost monies, and risk jobs. My friends from the NDP are promising billions in spending, but they don't have the plan to pay for it. And again, my fear is that taxes will have to go up and hurt families. So your choice is simple. Which party do you truly believe is best able to manage and protect the fragile Canadian economy and your jobs in the face of global economic turmoil? I believe that only our low tax plan for jobs and growth will keep London growing over the next 4 years and keep hard-working London families with a strong future. Thanks very much. I ask for your support.
I would also like to thank the Oakridge Presbyterian Church for giving us this opportunity tonight to talk about the issues that mean so much to all of us. This election is about our future and our children's future. Canadians know we can always do better. You want change. We hear that you want change. And I believe a Liberal government is offering the change that we need. This election is a clear choice between a government that wants to make smart investments that create jobs and growth, or austerity measures and cuts that will slow the economy further. Confident, optimistic countries invest in their own future. Better is always possible. While Canadians struggle to make ends meet, Stephen Harper continues to give billions to the wealthiest few. Mulcair irresponsibly supports Harper's plan to give more money to millionaires and will make major cuts to public services. Only Liberals have a plan to put more money in families' pockets to help with the high cost of raising their kids and by investing in the social infrastructure that gives all Canadians a real and fair chance at success. When you have an economy that works for the middle class, you have a country that works for everyone. The people of London West need a voice in Ottawa and not the other way around. I would be honored to be that voice. We offer a real positive difference for London West, and that's why I'm asking for your vote on October 19th. Thank you.
Our country is rightly preoccupied with the task of ridding ourselves of the pestilence of the Conservative government, and I have to say that it is a pestilence. I'm sorry to say. This government must be brought to an end. Many of us want precisely to do that, and the question we have to focus upon is not just how do we get rid of that government, but what are we going to replace it with? That is an even more important question. And what we are going to replace it with, I regret to say, if you vote for the Liberals or the NDP, is the status quo. You're going to get Harper Light. And I'm going to give you two examples. They love to say they're going to deal with the climate crisis, and they think if they stick the word sustainable in front of oil sands, the problem is going to be solved. That's not the case. One thing you have to do is you have to say no to pipeline infrastructure. Ms. Young didn't mention that Justin Trudeau enthusiastically supports the Keystone XL pipeline, that he wants the Eastern Energy Pipeline, which is going to traverse this province's waterways and threaten the purity of our water. And Mr. Rowlinson hasn't mentioned that Mr. Mulcair wants an expansion of the tar sands, sees that as being a key part of our economy, and refuses to rule out Energy East or Keystone XL. So that's the status quo. And even worse, there's a trade agreement, which nobody has mentioned tonight, that is a democracy-destroying Trojan horse called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. It will allow corporate lawyers to sit in judgment on the Canadian government, corporate lawyers, people who rake in fees by representing multinational corporations, when our government adopts socially or economically beneficial legislation that reduces their profitability. Do you trust corporate lawyers to decide whether our government has the right to enact legislation that protects the people of this country? I'm a lawyer and I can tell you I don't. All three of these parties support that agreement. All three of them. Mr. Mulcair said publicly several weeks ago that he enthusiastically supports that agreement. The Green Party says no. No to democracy-destroying trade agreements. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that ends our all candidates meeting for tonight. I want to just wrap it up with a couple things. We didn't get to a lot of the questions. But what we do when we've done these in the past is we will transcribe the questions and they will be shared with the various candidates, because sometimes the question is actually as important, if not more important, than the actual answer. So you will get a sense of what this crowd was asking this evening. So they will be shared with all four of the candidates. Let me close tonight by asking you to all give a round of applause for the candidates that put themselves on the line, put their lives on hold to run in this federal election. So let's give them a round of applause. How many in this room are under the age of 20? How many? Put your hand up. How many? There's 1, 3, and there was a young girl in the doorway down at the back. Well, there's a couple over here. So there's about 10 or 15. Okay? So ladies and gentlemen, I'm 54. The question we have and the decisions that we need to make on October 19th is about what kind of Canada do we want to have for the people that are under 25. So it's not about us anymore. It's about the next generation, because a few of us have some gray. Thank you, Gina. Gina won't let me forget the seniors. We all love you. But we're building a Canada for the future. Lester Pearson said this: whether we live together in confidence and cohesion with more faith and pride in ourselves and less self-doubt and hesitation, strong in the conviction that destiny of Canada is to unite, not divide, sharing in cooperation, not in separation or in conflict, respecting our past and welcoming our future. Let's choose wisely on October 19th. Thank you very much to Oakridge Presbyterian. And there's a guy standing in the back, he's a good friend of mine, Lawrence. He's the guy who has to clean up after this room. Please take all the literature with you.